What happens when a CEO walks into his own diner and uncovers a truth that shakes him to the core? Ethan Miles wasn't just the founder of Sunrise Diners. He was its soul, a dreamer who built a chain of cozy, family-first diners from a single, tiny roadside cafe a decade ago. But lately, something felt wrong. Reports on his desk said everything was fine, stable, business as usual. Yet, whispers of rude service, cold meals, and unhappy staff reached him like cracks forming in a once proud foundation. Ethan couldn't sit still any longer. If numbers could lie, faces couldn't. So he made a decision. No press releases, no corporate fanfare. Just a hoodie, an old pair of jeans, thick glasses, and a scruffy beard. No longer the CEO, just a regular nobody. He picked a diner 2 hours outside the city, a quiet suburban location no employee would ever expect him to visit. The plan: order a meal, watch, listen. But what Ethan was about to discover between the smiles, the hurried footsteps, and the clinking of coffee cups, there was something far deeper than slow service or bad management. It was a hidden battle, one that would force him to choose. Look away like so many others, or stand up and fight for the heart of everything he had built. This is the story of what happened when a CEO went undercover, and how one ordinary lunch changed an entire company forever. The midday sun stretched over the deserted little street as Ethan Miles tugged his hoodie lower and stepped through the glass doors of the suburban Sunrise Diner. No one paid him any attention. And that was exactly what he wanted. Gone were the sharp suits, the commanding presence of a CEO. He was just another middle-aged man dressed simply, blending into the sea of strangers. No one knew that the man who had just pushed open the door was the very person who had built this entire empire from nothing. Inside, the diner looked clean, but it lacked the warmth Ethan had once poured his heart into creating. The vinyl seats were cracked and worn. The once vibrant wall murals had faded into dreary shades. The clinking of cutlery, the low murmur of customer conversations, a heavy, suffocating atmosphere hung over the place. Something Ethan felt with every step he took. A young woman approached him. Her name tag read, "Sophie. Hi there. Welcome to Sunrise Diner. What would you like to drink first?" Her voice was gentle, but tinged with exhaustion. She could no longer hide. Ethan looked up and noticed the faint, dark circles under Sophie's eyes, the forced smile struggling to hold back an invisible storm. "Just a coffee? Thanks," Ethan replied, settling into a seat by the window. Sophie nodded and quickly moved between tables, delivering drinks with mechanical efficiency. Ethan wasn't in a rush. He watched. His eyes picked up every detail. The way Sophie greeted each customer with a strained smile. The way she deftly avoided eye contact with a heavy-set man barking orders near the kitchen. His face twisted into a permanent scowl. That man was Travis Moore, the shift manager today. Ethan didn't need to ask to know who he was. He had seen the name countless times in internal reports. But cold words on paper could never capture the suffocating reality unfolding before him. The coffee arrived quickly. Ethan murmured his thanks, noting how Sophie scurried away without lingering a second longer. Just then, a loud shout erupted from the kitchen. "Sophie, table 5's been waiting forever. You want me to serve it myself." The entire diner fell silent for a brief, painful moment. Sophie flinched, her face turning crimson as she rushed back to the kitchen. Ethan gripped his coffee cup tightly, feeling a surge of anger build within him. This was not the Sunrise Diner he had dreamed of. Nearby, A middle-aged couple whispered, "Simple lunch." And we've been waiting almost 30 minutes. It wasn't like this before. A group of teenagers shook their heads in frustration. No wonder my friend said not to come to this location anymore. Ethan heard every word. Each comment cut deep, like a knife through his pride. When his burger and fries arrived, he nodded politely. But the food was just an excuse. What he was really swallowing was the bitter truth of what had become of his beloved creation. As Ethan picked at his meal, a choked sob rang out from the kitchen. He looked up, heart clenching. It was Sophie. Through the slightly ajar kitchen door, he caught a glimpse of her wiping away tears, while Travis stood there, arms crossed, face like stone. No one intervened. No one dared speak up. Customers continued eating. The clinking of dishes carried on, like a hollow, artificial soundtrack. Ethan set down his fork. He knew it was time to act, but he wouldn't reveal himself just yet. He needed to observe more. He needed to know who was truly worth trusting, and who needed to be removed immediately. Today, Ethan had only set one foot into the truth. Tomorrow, the battle to reclaim the soul of Sunrise Diner would truly begin. The next morning, Ethan returned to Sunrise Diner. Same old hoodie, thick glasses, a slouched appearance. No one would spare a second glance at. But this time, he carried a sharper purpose: to observe more closely what was lurking beneath the surface. The diner was quieter in the early hours, with none of the shouting layered over the usual noise like the day before. But the suffocating tension was still there. Sophie had arrived early. Her face looked even more exhausted, the dark circles under her eyes more pronounced. Yet she still managed to force a smile each time she approached a customer's table. Ethan tucked himself into a secluded corner and ordered his usual coffee. His eyes followed every small movement. The way Sophie wiped down tables slowly, occasionally coughing into her sleeve. The way she apologized repeatedly for slow service, even when it wasn't her fault. Behind the counter, a young man named Connor Thin, worn features but bright eyes, was busy prepping food. Ethan noticed that whenever Sophie got flustered or ran short on something, Connor would silently slide a finished plate toward her, offering a discreet, encouraging nod. There was still goodness here. Ethan made a mental note. Around midday, Travis Moore arrived. The entire atmosphere in the diner shifted in an instant. No shouting needed, just the icy sweep of his gaze was enough to make the staff freeze up like startled animals. Ethan saw everything, and he could feel the undercurrent of fear in every step, every breath the employees took. Travis passed by Ethan without so much as a nod. Just a contemptuous glance at Ethan's disheveled appearance before moving on. A customer at the next table asked for a coffee refill. Sophie rushed over, but in her haste, she accidentally spilled a little water on the table. Immediately, Travis's voice cracked through the diner like a hammer. "Can't even handle something that simple. You want to lose your job today." The sneering tone froze the entire diner into awkward silence. Sophie bowed her head, trembling as she cleaned up the spill. Connor gripped the vegetable knife so tightly his knuckles turned white, tension radiating from him. Under the table, Ethan clenched his fists. He could feel the fury rising in his chest. This wasn't just poor management anymore. This was emotional abuse. When Sophie brought Ethan his fresh coffee, she mumbled an apology. I'm sorry if you had to wait." Ethan looked up, meeting her tired yet still shining eyes. "It's okay. You're doing great," he said, voice warm and steady. For a split second, Sophie's eyes glistened, but she quickly lowered her gaze and hurried away, afraid Travis might notice. Ethan gritted his teeth. He knew this was why he had to fight, not just to save the company, but to save the people silently bearing wounds like Sophie and Connor. By noon, the diner was packed, orders flying, dishes clattering, babies crying. The pressure mounted, and Travis unleashed. He barked orders across the diner, snapping at both employees and customers alike. Some patrons stood up and left, faces twisted with annoyance. Ethan didn't need to take any more notes. Each image, each cruel word burned into his memory. He had seen enough, and he knew this afternoon would not end like any ordinary day. A storm was coming. A storm Travis Moore would never see coming. The midday sun blazed down on the empty streets, but inside Sunrise Diner, the air was as cold as a winter's day. Ethan sat quietly in a corner, his coffee long gone cold. Not that he cared. He was waiting for the right moment to step in. And then it came. An elderly customer in a checkered shirt waved irritably at Sophie. His plate of scrambled eggs clearly wasn't up to his standards. "My eggs are a mess. Is this what you call service?" He barked impatiently. Sophie rushed to apologize, her cheeks flushing red. "I'll get you a new one right away, sir," she stammered. But before she could even reach the kitchen, Travis pounced in full view of every customer. "What the hell, Sophie?" he roared, his voice booming through the diner. "How many times do I have to say it? If you can't serve a simple order, maybe you should pack up and leave today." Sophie froze in place, hands trembling. The entire diner fell silent. A small child at a nearby table burst into tears. The mother hurried to comfort the child, shooting a glare at Travis. Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He stood up sharply. The screech of his chair dragging across the floor sliced through the thick silence, turning every head toward him. He walked steadily toward Travis, his eyes locked on the domineering manager. Travis turned, scowling. "Who the hell are you? Can't you see? I'm handling my staff. Stay out of things that don't concern you." Ethan gave a faint, almost amused smile, a smile that barely concealed the storm gathering behind it. "I think," Ethan said, voice low and cutting clear through the tension, "you might want to choose your words more carefully. Travis Moore." Travis blinked, hesitating. "You know my name," he said warily. Ethan calmly pulled out a slim wallet and flipped it open, revealing a gleaming Sunrise Diner badge. The name beneath the logo was impossible to miss. Ethan Miles, founder and CEO. The room froze. Sophie's jaw dropped open. Connor poked his head out from the kitchen, face paling instantly. Even some customers began pulling out their phones, quietly filming the surreal scene. Travis stiffened. His face drained of color, then turned beet red within seconds. "Sarcate. Plural. Mel. Mr. Ethan." Travis stuttered. "That's right." Ethan cut him off, his tone ice cold. "And I just personally witnessed how you humiliated your staff in front of our customers. Do you really think I built this company from scratch to nurture contempt and abuse?" Travis opened his mouth, scrambling for a defense, but Ethan raised a hand, stopping him cold. No need to explain. He turned to Sophie, his voice softening. "You didn't do anything wrong." Sophie blinked back tears, her body still trembling. Facing Travis once more, Ethan delivered the final blow, mercilessly. "Effective immediately, you're fired. You can pack your things and leave the Sunrise Diner system today. Travis stood there, stunned, his face purple with rage and humiliation. A few customers started clapping quietly. Connor exhaled a long breath in the kitchen. Sophie just stood there, wide-eyed, as if waking from a long nightmare. Ethan didn't bother looking back at Travis again. He knew today's battle was only the beginning. He walked slowly over to the cashier stand, where Sophie stood, still shaking, gently placing his hand on the counter. Ethan said, his voice warm and reassuring, "Don't be afraid. Starting today, things will be different." And in that moment, among the confused whispers of guests and the silent stares of employees, a tiny flame of hope flickered to life. Ethan knew he had made the right choice. He wasn't just fixing a restaurant. He was reclaiming the soul of Sunrise Diner, starting from the smallest, most human things. That afternoon, sunlight poured over the worn leather booths inside Sunrise Diner, casting everything in a warm, golden glow. But inside, the air was still thick with unresolved emotions. Travis Moore was gone, quietly, defeated. The diner seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief. No more yelling. No more menacing glares. Ethan Miles sat at the far corner table, fingers interlocked, his gaze steady and thoughtful. In front of him sat Sophie Carter and Dylan Brooks, the two employees he had been quietly observing over the past 2 days. They looked uneasy, hesitant, as if still struggling to believe everything that had just unfolded. Ethan smiled gently, breaking the heavy silence. "Relax. I'm not here to reprimand anyone. I'm here to listen." Sophie glanced at Dylan, then dropped her eyes to the table. Ethan continued, "I need you to be honest with me about everything. About how this diner is being run. About what you've been through." A heavy pause stretched out between them. The ceiling fan creaked above, spinning lazily in the warm air. Finally, Dylan spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "Honestly, Travis wasn't the only problem." Ethan nodded encouragingly. "He treated us badly, sure. But deeper than that, the whole system here's been neglected for too long," Dylan said, his expression serious. "Short-staffed. Pay to. Overlapping shifts. No proper training for new hires. Everyone's just been running on fumes, holding on however they could." Sophie twisted her hands together tightly, adding in a hoarse whisper. "I used to think maybe all the locations were like this, that if I just worked hard enough, things would get better. But Travis never gave anyone a chance. If you spoke up, you were pushed out. If you worked harder, it didn't matter." Her voice cracked at the end. Ethan felt every word like a needle piercing his chest. He silently cursed himself. Trusting cold. Sanitized reports had blinded him to the rot growing beneath the surface. Leaning back, Ethan asked quietly, "Did you ever think about leaving?" Sophie let out a brittle laugh. "Many times, but then I thought, if I left, who would stay? Who would help the elderly customers who need a little extra patience? Who would smile at the kids when they spilled their drinks? If all the good people left, or what would be left?" Her words struck Ethan harder than any accusation could have. It wasn't ambition or salary that kept her here. It was kindness. Simple, stubborn kindness. Dylan nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought about quitting, too. But every time I saw Sophie still hanging on, I couldn't leave. At least someone still believed this place was worth fighting for. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling his throat tighten. It was people like Sophie and Dylan. They were the real reason Sunrise Diners had survived all these years. Not profits, not fancy menus, but the patient smiles and small, uncelebrated acts of humanity. Bracing his hands on the table, Ethan's voice rang out low, steady, filled with resolve. Thank you for not giving up, for keeping a little piece of this place's soul alive, even when everything else was falling apart. Sophie and Dylan looked up at him, their eyes shining with unshed tears. Ethan leaned forward, his gaze burning with determination. I promise you, not just here, at every Sunrise Diner. We're going to change things. Dylan's fists clenched on the table. Sophie clutched the hem of her apron, her lips trembling. For the first time in a long, long time, they felt it. Something real. Not hollow promises. Not empty speeches. Real hope. Real change already beginning to take root. The next morning, Sunrise Diner opened its doors to the first light of dawn. But today, the atmosphere was different. No more Travis Moore. No more wary glances. Only genuine people and a CEO determined to change everything. Ethan arrived early, a thick folder of documents and a well-worn notebook tucked under his arm. The old hoodie was gone, replaced by a simple dress shirt, still casual. But his eyes now burned with clear purpose. He stepped into the diner and called Sophie and Dylan over. They exchanged a glance and quickly gathered, along with a few other employees, faces still dazed, not quite daring to believe that real change was finally happening. Ethan smiled, his voice ringing out firm and steady. We're starting fresh, right here, right now, before the wide, stunned eyes of everyone present. Ethan spread the documents out on the table. This is the new Sunrise Diner reform plan. He pointed to each section. New HR policies. All employees who have worked for more than 3 months will be offered official contracts. Every shift over 6 hours must include proper breaks. No one, not even managers, is allowed to yell at or demean a colleague. Complete retraining. Free monthly workshops on service skills, customer communication, and conflict resolution. Anyone can register to qualify for raises and promotions. New hiring initiative. Starting this week, at least 3 new employees will be hired to ease the workload. Priority will go to candidates who show genuine service spirit and kindness. Employee Support Fund. A portion of monthly profits will go into an emergency fund for employees facing hardship, illness, accidents, family crises. The fund will be co-managed by employee and management representatives. Hitatai. Culture of recognition. Each month, employees receiving the highest customer praise will earn special awards, not just cash bonuses, but public recognition too. The entire room fell silent for a moment. Then Sophie hesitantly asked, her voice trembling, Mr. Ethan, is all this really happening? Ethan smiled warmly, his eyes full of unwavering conviction. Not just happening, it's mandatory. Because if Sunrise Diner wants to survive, this has to be a place people want to work, not a place they're just waiting to escape from. Dylan clenched his fists, feeling a surge of excitement. A young busboy named Tommy timidly raised his hand. So, will we be allowed to suggest ideas too? Ethan nodded without hesitation. We'll hold regular group meetings. No one will be left out. Every voice here matters. The diner seemed to light up. Hope sparkled in the eyes of the young staff. Sophie covered her mouth, overcome with emotion. That afternoon, Ethan rolled up his sleeves and helped everyone deep clean the diner. He swept the floors, wiped down tables, and even washed dishes, never acting like some untouchable CEO. Dylan joked. "Pretty sure you're the only CEO who can wipe a table this well." Ethan laughed heartily. "If you can't serve in the smallest ways, Cyril, how can you ever lead anyone properly?" Laughter rang out bright and unrestrained, like sunshine pouring through the windows. For the first time in many long months, real joy filled the little diner. Not forced smiles, not hesitant footsteps, but genuine trust is beginning to bloom. Sunrise Diner was being reborn, not with flashy signs or grand rebranding, but with people, with hope, and with the pure, simple values Ethan had once laid the very first bricks upon. A week after the revolution at Sunrise Diner, everything began to shift slowly but surely. The gloomy cloud that had once blanketed the place was starting to lift. Every morning, Ethan was at the diner before any of the employees. He didn't just observe. He rolled up his sleeves and worked like any regular staff member, helping Connor check fresh ingredients, coaching Sophie on finer service techniques, chatting with Tommy about how to create a welcoming first impression with customers. He didn't impose. He walked alongside them. And that chum changed everything. On the third day after the reform, a regular customer, Mrs. Helen, a widow living 3 blocks away, took her usual seat by the window. Previously, every visit from her was marked by complaints about slow service. But today, just minutes after sitting down, Tommy brought her a cup of hot tea, complete with a neatly folded napkin. Mrs. Helen raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Are you new here, dear?" Tommy beamed. "No, ma'am. I just got some retraining. We're working with our whole hearts now." Mrs. Helen chuckled for the first time in months. And when her warm apple pie arrived, paired with the question, "Would you like some free vanilla ice cream with that?" tears welled in her eyes. A small act of kindness, but to a weary heart, it was nothing short of magic. That evening, the diner was packed a sight that hadn't been seen in ages. Dylan bustled in the kitchen, his face glowing with energy. Connor manned the register, quick and efficient, but always wearing a warm smile. Sophie guided guests to their tables, greeting every child by name, remembering regulars' favorite orders. At a corner booth, a young family whispered to each other, "This place feels totally different now. The staff is happier. The service is quicker." The father nodded. "Guests will be coming back more often." Ethan heard it all, and his heart tightened not from pain, but from a profound, quiet joy. Sunrise Diner was becoming the dream he had once dared to believe in again. By the weekend, Ethan organized a small team meeting right inside the diner, after the crowd had cleared. No grand conference table, no fancy PowerPoint presentations, just a circle of chairs, sweaty faces still glowing with pride. He asked, "So, how has the past week felt for everyone?" Tommy blurted out excitedly, "So much fun. Boss, I've gotten more tips this week than I did all last month combined." Everyone laughed. Connor chimed in, "No more snapping or yelling. Even the older customers say we're now the bright spot of the whole neighborhood." Sophie added softly, "For the first time, it feels like we're not just working to survive another day. We're actually living." Ethan looked at every face, every bright, hopeful gaze, and he knew He wasn't just fixing a broken system. He was healing souls that had once been fractured. Before the meeting ended, Ethan pulled out 2 small envelopes from his pocket. He walked over to Sophie and Connor. "This," he said, "is a small token of thanks for not giving up on this place, even when it was crumbling." Sophie opened her envelope and gasped. A bonus equal to 2 months' salary. Connor nearly dropped his envelope, stammering. "Ethan, this is too much." Ethan smiled gently. "It's never too much compared to the loyalty and kindness you've given." The room erupted into applause. That night, Sunrise Diner was filled with laughter, true laughter. No bitterness hidden beneath it. Stepping outside under the starry night sky, Ethan lifted his gaze upward. In his heart, a silent vow echoed. Sunrise Diner won't just be revived. It will become a true home for every heart that knows how to love. And he would fight for that dream, no matter what challenges lay ahead. On Monday morning, as Ethan sat at the counter reviewing internal reports, his phone buzzed in his pocket. The call was from Janet, his trusted assistant at headquarters. Janet's voice was urgent. "Mr. Ethan, there's trouble." Ethan frowned. "What happened?" Janet lowered her voice. "Some of the regional supervisors are pushing back against your reform plan. They're saying prioritizing employees and customers too much will drive up costs and hurt profits. Word is, they're rallying to ask the board to reconsider your authority." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He gripped the phone tightly, his voice dropping. "Who's leading it?" Janet hesitated for a moment. "Martin Hayes." Ethan narrowed his eyes. Martin Hayes, the veteran regional supervisor in charge of 7 branches in the city's northern districts. The same man who had repeatedly opposed Ethan's vision of a kindness-first culture, always pushing for faster sales and profit maximization at all costs. A relic of the old world, where only numbers mattered, not people. Setting the phone down, Ethan sat still. He knew the real battle was just beginning. Fixing one diner had gone unnoticed. But now that Sunrise Diner was truly transforming, becoming a new symbol, those sitting atop the old pyramid felt threatened. They weren't afraid of Ethan. They were afraid of the awakening he was sparking. Afraid of a system where employees knew their worth. Afraid of a Sunrise Diner beloved by customers, not just tolerated. They wouldn't sit idly by and watch their old empire crumble. That day, Ethan kept his composure. He made coffee for every employee. He personally carried meals to elderly customers. He listened to every small piece of feedback. But inside, he was preparing for a much bigger war. That evening, after closing, Ethan gathered all the staff for the first internal meeting at Sunrise Diner. Sophie, Dylan, Connor, Tommy, and the others sat around him, a mix of nerves and anticipation. Ethan stood in front of them, his voice low, but filled with strength. "I won't lie to you. There are people who don't like what we're doing here." The room fell silent. "But I want you to know we're not turning back. We're not changing to please those who worship dry statistics. We're changing because we believe people deserve better." He paused, letting his gaze sweep over every face. "Are you ready to stand with me even if the road ahead gets harder?" A brief moment of silence. Then Sophie stood up first. "I'm with you." Dylan rose next. "Me too." Connor, Tommy. And one by one, every single employee stood up, eyes burning with determination. Ethan smiled a smile that did not waver. That very night, he drafted a detailed counterattack plan. Record tangible results. Every branch participating in the reform would log customer satisfaction rates and revenue improvements. Tell real stories. Each branch was tasked with documenting their transformation through photos, videos, and real testimonials. Build an alliance. Ethan sought out young, visionary branch managers, those who believed in the new culture and began weaving them into a network. He wouldn't just fight back against the darkness. He would spread so much light, there would be no shadows left to hide in. 3 days later, at Sunrise Diner's headquarters, Ethan walked into the large conference room, facing the cold stares of the regional supervisors. At the center of the table, Martin Hayes leaned back, wearing a smug smile. "We need to talk, Ethan, about how you're changing too many things." Ethan simply smiled, calm, unshaken, and inside him, the fire burned brighter than ever. He knew, to save Sunrise Diner, he couldn't just fix one little restaurant. He had to transform an entire system, and he was ready to fight to the very end. Here's your full English translation, keeping the storytelling tone, emotional depth, and pacing you intended. The conference room at Sunrise Diner headquarters was bathed in bright lights, but the atmosphere inside was as cold as winter. Ethan stood at the long boardroom table, facing nearly 20 regional supervisors and executive board members. At the center, Martin Hayes sat cross-legged, a look of defiance in his eyes. There was no avoiding this confrontation anymore. Martin spoke first, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Ethan, your changes are causing too much trouble." A few others nodded subtly. Martin shoved the file in front of him across the table. "Costs are up. Staffing has ballooned. Your model, as touching as it sounds, isn't sustainable for long-term profitability." Ethan listened, his gaze calm and steady. He had expected Martin to play the profit card, but Ethan had come prepared. He opened his laptop and connected to the large screen in the center of the room. Images flickered to life. Messages of gratitude from customers. Videos of employees laughing and working with genuine joy. Photos of Sunrise Diner packed with customers, a stark contrast to the ghost town it had been months before. Then he brought up the numbers. Revenue at the newly reformed Sunrise Diner branch was up by 18% after just 1 month. Customer return rates had jumped to 72%, a 30% increase. Customer satisfaction scores hit an unprecedented 94%. The room fell silent. Martin frowned. A board member, Linda, who oversaw the Western region, spoke up. "These numbers are honestly impressive," someone else whispered. "We've never had satisfaction rates this high before." Ethan locked eyes with Martin, his voice low and firm. Sunrise Diner was never just about selling food. We sell emotions. We nurture memories, and beautiful memories are what create lifetime customers. He emphasized every word. "What I'm doing isn't fighting against profits. I'm saving our profits by saving the heart of Sunrise Diner." Martin flushed angrily, snapping back. "But that model can't scale across the board. One successful branch doesn't mean the entire system will work." Ethan smiled, unshaken. "You're right. One branch doesn't prove everything." He snapped his fingers. Janet, waiting just outside, rolled in a heavy cart stacked with documents. Ethan calmly pulled them out. Reports from 5 other branches that had already started adopting the new model over the past 2 weeks. Customer feedback letters, photos, videos, first-hand evidence. A petition with signatures from over 300 employees, volunteering to join the reformation efforts. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Martin's face paled. Linda flipped through the documents, then sighed. It's not just one branch. It's a movement. Another board member, Mark, who oversaw the Southern District, nodded. If Sunrise Diner wants to survive for the next 10, 20 years, this is the only path. Ethan stepped forward, concluding, I'm not asking for unanimous agreement. I'm asking for courage. The courage to admit that the world has changed. And Sunrise Diner must change too, or be left behind by our own customers. He let his gaze sweep across the room. The decision is yours. Silence hung heavy. Martin clenched his jaw, realizing the tide had turned. Linda rose first. Voice resolute. I support Ethan. Mark stood next. So do I. One by one, others raised their hands in agreement. Only Martin remained seated, silent, isolated. He stood, adjusted his jacket stiffly, and growled. I dissent. Ethan nodded respectfully. And I respect your opinion. Without another word, Martin stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Ethan didn't even look back. He knew. IBD. The real battle had been won. 3 days later, Sunrise Diner made the official announcement company-wide. We are stepping into a new era. Kinda. More respectful and more sustainably successful. Ethan stood outside the old Sunrise Diner branch on the outskirts of town, watching as a line of customers formed at the door. Inside, Sophie, Dylan, Connor, and Tommy bustled about, busy but smiling brightly. Golden afternoon sunlight bathed the weathered storefront, but inside their hearts, a new light had already burst forth. Sunrise Diner, not just reborn, it had become a true home for hearts that knew how to smile. And Ethan Miles, the man who dared to fight for what was right, was ready to keep writing the next chapters of this incredible journey. You see, any business can slap on a fresh coat of paint. Any company can roll out a flashy new logo. But if they don't rebuild the heart, it's just an empty shell. Ethan Miles showed us. Kindness doesn't make you weak. It's kindness that builds the strongest empires. Here's a question for you. If you were Ethan, standing between short-term profits and long-term trust, which would you choose? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more stories that stir your heart, stories that remind us what truly matters. Because the journey to build a better world begins when you dare to believe. A small act of kindness today can change an entire future.